Hello and welcome back to Pause, Rewind and Play. Today we're going to be talking about music production technology, past, present and future. I am incredibly lucky yet again to have Stephen Tallamy back for the discussion. How are you doing?
I'm doing very well. How are you?
Yeah, not bad at all. I mean, we've had a prior discussion about cloud production and all the technologies that go behind that. This is going to be a little bit different in that we're not necessarily talking about TV and video so much, but we're talking about a lot of technologies that will still be relevant, but we're going to go in the direction of music. And this is a very interesting one, I think, to discuss with you, because quite aside from being deeply technical, from operating in CTO roles, you are a very accomplished musician as well that has recorded in very professional environments.
Right.
And you love that part of what you do too, right? I mean, that is, do you want to tell us just a little bit about your journey as a musician? Because I think we've covered the professional part in a preceding episode, but I'd love to know just a little bit about how that journey started for you. And yeah, if you want to chuck in a couple of bits of how you adopted different technologies along the way.
Right.
I think that would be fascinating.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, like from very young age, I was, the legend was I was sat on my mum's lap as she was doing piano lessons, when I was a little baby. And so I was always around music, and piano was always something I enjoyed. I tended to find that when it came to piano training, I got certain far and I got a bit bored with it because I didn't really like playing other people's music as much. I just wanted to noodle about and play something. Sometimes it was quite fun to sort of learn songs or other things, but that generally was kind of where I enjoyed the most. And so that led me very quickly into wanting to write music, and that becomes a lot easier when you introduce technology into the mix because, you can use computers to sequence things and so on. So, bit of bedroom type, writing at home as a teenager and so on. And then I sort of took a bit of a break, did a lot of technology, had a family and all those kind of things. And then over the last...
Did a ton of technology.
Just a bit, yeah. And so still a bit of music, but then in the last sort of 6 or 7 years, really come back to it. And the step change in the technology that is available has been available in the last sort of 7 years to where I was as a teenager. Wasn't that long ago, hopefully.
Okay.
All right. But that step change in the capability of the computing itself and what it can enable has meant that I've then been able to get back and actually write instead of music that sounds a little bit noddy and a bit synthesized or something. Actually sounds like real full-on soundtracks from films, soundtracks. And that's, because that technology is available, I've been able to score movies. Not, they've featured movies, but not like Hollywood. They've been independent films. And so it's that technology that enables me to do those kind of things. And so some of my music has been on television, been on film. Again, not in a huge way, but again, it's amazing that we can do that today with, the within my bedroom, it's still in my bedroom, my loft now, that I can achieve such results.
And has it, because you're someone that is deeply technical, but even still, has it blown your mind as to that jump over the last, 10 years?
Yes.
I've watched it somewhat from afar, and of what I've understood of it, for me, it's been quite eye-opening to say the least. But for you, that's been like deeply in the tools, the software, some of the things that you used to produce and create. Yeah, it must have been a roller coaster.
Absolutely. I mean, it's just like more and more, as they call it, gone in the box, i.e. in one unit, one computer. I mean, you take one of the M3, M4, Macs or a high-end PC, you can run everything inside of that one thing, which really simplifies a lot of things for you, where in the past you might have had to have a separate mixing desk, you might have had to have outboard equipment, you'd have to have synthesizers, you'd have to, even if you had sample-based things,
the sort of stuff you'd find in a studio, right?
Yeah.
I mean, all of those things, hardware.
Absolutely. Yeah. You'd have to have all of those, which is very expensive, to do, but you'd have to then rig them all up and make them all talk to each other. And it really could stifle your creativity. And you was also, when it came to getting it into the box, you would often be limited by something, the number of tracks you could record or the amount of things that you could control at any one time, just because of the protocols and also just the amount of memory or storage. Whereas now, when I write a piece of music, I'm not really limited in the box by anything, which on its can be a downside because, as we talked in the previous episode, sometimes limitations, breed more creativity. But I think it's just that amazing that you can do all of those things inside of the box that a computer, even 5 years ago, would struggle to achieve because of just the amount. It's not like video where the data rates are as high. It's often the computation that's required to create a reverb to make things sound like it's in a big hall, or to do those types of things. It's that computation. So it's usually the CPU and sometimes memory that are being stressed a lot more than maybe data rates that you might get on video.
I mean, I think you is it true then to say perhaps that if you've got a powerful computer of some variety and you've got some decent mechanism for getting your audio into that, so a high quality pseudo professional mic or set of mics, some way to get the audio in, there's not too necessarily much else. Maybe a good pair of monitor speakers, well, I don't know, but maybe not even that.
It's so low cost now. I mean, just watch one of the videos with Billie Eilish and her brother making, basically from their home, they have a Mac, they have Logic, which is relatively cost effective, and then they have actually quite a simple microphone setup, usually one microphone, loads of overdubs because they enjoy sort of like perfecting and the sound things, but loads of which again you might not have been able to do in a studio because studio time is expensive, but they can do it in their own home, just an interface. And I think they actually mostly use headphones for it rather than big monitor speakers. And so again, it really makes it very accessible for anyone to be making music today that you couldn't have had before. And there's such good entry points, be that even with an iPad and GarageBand or a PC with Ableton. There's such low entry points now.
Low barrier to entry. Absolutely. Easy to jump on. And in terms then of, if we think half, maybe it's a full step back in terms of the kind of historical trends, and I wrote down what you'd written to me before, and kind of like some of those milestones that came along with the likes of multi-track synthesizers and sequencers and MIDI, digital synths, tape to hard disk, sampling and synthesis together, operating together, DAWs. And then this idea of the kind of digital distribution. I mean, I think that's an like when you think about all those things in sequence, that is an incredible amount of progress, and actually not in all that long, really.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, it is quite incredible that people can be releasing music to other people within hours of making it. They can come up with the idea and they can have it on Spotify that fast, or on YouTube or any other distribution platform that they want to. And that's that whole digitalization. And if you think of what that would have had to have been, I've got an idea, I'm going to have to hire a studio and I'm going to get a band and I'm going to have to play it in live, and I'm going to play it onto a stereo, track. So I'll get one take, or I get a couple of takes, but I have to pick one, or maybe I can splice two. Whereas multi-track means you can fix and change certain parts of it, and then as that becomes digital, it goes from being a very linear experience to being a non-linear experience, where you can cut together and retry things, and you've got a lot more ability to do interesting things with it. And then as you bring all that processing as well together, so you can do interesting effects and stuff, and it just doesn't take as long, because traditional methods with hardware might mean, I've recorded all this stuff, now I've got to play it all the way back out through some equipment and all the way back in again. Whereas once it's in the digital domain, it's just bits that a computer can just crunch through. And so again, you can be finished, hit a button, and if it's a 2-minute track, it might be rendered in a few seconds with everything processed onto it. And so that is really quite incredible in terms of that ability for anybody to do that. Obviously, you've still got to learn the musicianship and what is the creativity, but there's so low barriers to entry in that. And
to some extent, where we've landed is this. You've almost got. You mentioned a couple of artists there before, but the kind of the rise of the individual producer, who's carrying a very small amount of kit ultimately, and can do that anywhere and can do it whilst traveling. And certainly from my perspective, you see these videos of various DJs that are moving between different live performances, and they're doing their production work as they're traveling.
Yeah.
And it's fully electronic, and it sits inside of the laptop, and they are able to then, as you say, kind of maybe they're in the midst of a journey, and they just punch out a track and release it, like off it goes.
Yeah.
And that ability to be able to almost work from anywhere individually, do you think that's a characteristic or some sort of a signature of where we are now these days?
Yeah, I would say so. I mean, if you look at, composers working in the media industry, film composers and TV composers and stuff, the majority of them, particularly, driven by the pandemic, sort of had to move out of central studios that they might have worked in if they had been in a central studio, move back home and then, establish a home setup. But again, because of the quality of equipment that you can get into your home and the smaller amount that you need, you can actually set up, and then they've just stayed in that state. They're working from home, and they're still able, because they can easily move files around. I mean, audio files are generally a little bit easier to move around because they're generally smaller. You can move that, send it to a dub, and just do it remotely. You don't need to be there.
But it's not necessarily all plain sailing, is it, though? Because I think there is, with so much in software, the commonality that you have, or the lastability that you have with things like various hardware connectors and cables, is that they withstand the test of time, and perhaps not all software does over time as it gets updated, as it has a certain hardware baseline that then the next version of software requires. Things change, but in a way that wasn't like it was before. So in studios, your hardware that is in that studio is in situ. It's pretty solid. It's easily once you've got it working, it's easily connectable, easily usable. Might it be the case that the software isn't necessarily always so in that way?
That can be a bit of a challenge of it. I mean, so the MIDI interface, which was designed many years ago to connect synthesizers together so that one could drive another, or a sequencer could drive a synthesizer, and there would be some connectivity. That standard is still here today, and I can still get out any equipment as modern, obviously modern equipment with MIDI still there. Often it's over a USB connection these days rather than a hard connection, but it's still exactly the same protocol. So I know that equipment works. But of course, when it's hardware, it can eventually age, and it needs its own help. But certainly, there can be some challenges when it comes to a software thing. Big leaps in processing space from Intel to ARM in the Mac space, or other things where people they really depend on that tool and they want that tool forever, but they can't always have it forever because it's just not cost effective for the software manufacturer to keep it up to date and keep it running.
They evolve the software and it goes through a version shift that fundamentally changes the interface. And I'm not necessarily speaking from a music perspective there, but I can think of a few cases previously where we talked about workflows before, but you're used to doing things in a certain way. You have a particular way of doing things, and maybe it's not the most efficient, but you like it.
Yes.
And then something changes. You can't easily necessarily do the thing. And again, not necessarily from a music perspective, but I know there have been some softwares that have drawn ire from their users where they were just happy with the way that it was. Like maybe it didn't need a change. And either it got a cosmetic change or it got a functional change that people felt made it either less easy to use or just added time to what it was they were doing. But
you build up that muscle memory with the tool, and at the end of the day, they are still just tools to the creativity process. And so you kind of, it would be a bit like picking up a hammer, but it was made of jelly, and it would be like, well, that's not what I wanted from my hammer, and so
it's quite a picture.
It's quite, but it can be like that. You're like, well, all the bits have moved, and the things that were my productivity gains have all gone, and that people can just lose interest in it. And it also comes down to also the way people pay for the software that they're using, because a lot of people just want to know that every time they open up a music session or something like that, previous recording, but all the things that they had are still there. And if they've stopped paying for something, that can be quite a disincentive to doing it that well, I have to remember to keep subscribing. And just like any other subscription, they eventually add up. It seems all right on one, but then you get another, and soon you're subscribed to the maximum. Same with my TV subscriptions. I seem to have lots of video subscriptions, and they just keep going for a long time. But if you think to remove one of those things, and it's an essential tool, it can be. A lot of people there's been quite a lot of pushback to the software vendors who've done that. They've taken something that maybe was perpetually licensed and turned it into a software SaaS style, recurring revenue, which is great from a sustainability. And I think, again, this is where, as a technologist, I can sympathize on both sides of the house, because, if you are going to create a piece of software and someone pays for it perpetually, then you need to upgrade the software because of modernization. It's all cost on the business, but that cost is gone. And if people aren't buying as much of it now, how do you keep your customers happy? So I can sympathize on both sides of the house, but there certainly tends to be that pushback, and that I want to know this is mine. But as we spoke about, there's that it's not really yours, because if Apple changed, their operating system, or Windows changed their operating system, and your thing stops working, and the software vendor, then you haven't got it at all anymore.
Hello. I hope you're enjoying the conversation in today's episode. I just wanted to take a moment to say a huge thank you to Spicy Mango, who are our Series 1 sponsor. If you're looking to build global scale media and digital publishing platforms, Spicy Mango bring that serious expertise. They dig deep, they look at your business goals, and they ensure technology actually does what it should do in order to drive growth and remain cost effective. You can get in touch with them at spicymango.co.uk. And with that, let's get back to the episode. Let's talk a little bit about AI tools, and when we discussed this a little bit previously, but I think the idea of AI as like a creative partner,
yes,
as a tool to help you maybe speed along through the process, or help you out, streamline some things. It's great, and to the extent that maybe it'll even offer you some options that perhaps you or enhance it. It's something in a way that you hadn't thought of, could be good. And certainly some of those AI and ML techniques that have run truly in the background, like things like software that can work out stems, that can help with your mastering, like true kind of software tools, if you like. Great, like really good stuff. Yep. There is a different branch of that, or a different area of that, which is the generative area, where there's an enormous amount of innovation happening at the moment, and a lot of maybe innovations are a rapid iteration of those tools, where they're doing much more of that creative process.
Yes,
just by definition. So, what's your take on the two of those? I mean, where do you sit, and what do you think about it?
I mean, the tool side of it is pretty straightforward. We've had tools, they've all been automated. If they use a machine learning algorithm, or just a hand-coded algorithm, or some other algorithm way of working, to me that doesn't really matter too much. As long as I've got some control over the inputs and outputs of what it actually does. So, I quite often use mastering tools that are AI driven. They've got a sound profile that you want it to sound like. You say, I want it to sound like orchestral music or like pop music.
Kind of audio equivalent of like a LUT.
Yes, exactly. I wanted that in that, and then it will sort of create you a profile, a whole stack of, okay, here's an EQ, here's some compressors, here's some limiters, here's, various other things. And it would generate that chain for you. And then you can play with the dials and bring it back to the way you want it to sound. But it's at least got you started. And as long as you understand the principles and of how they work, which is pretty good, because I think it's a big step forward, because you've already seen it set up reasonably. So you go, oh, well, that's how a compressor normally gets set up. I never knew before, but that's the good way of doing it. And you can turn it off and hear the difference and turn it back on again. And so I think those tool side of things, very
happy with those.
Very happy with those. It's always useful to go back and experiment and understand the underlying principles of what are they doing to your sound, because your ears are your best friends. And so turn them on, turn them off to see what they've done, and then go, oh, I like that. Oh, no, actually, that's made it worse. Sometimes I've put stuff through the tool and go, oh, that's made it worse, but I know how to take what it's done and apply it in a slightly different way and made it sound good. But on the generative side, it's interesting. There's sort of different parts to this. If you think about, going back to the synthesizers and things like that, sequencers, those were often somewhat generative, right? You could take an arpeggiator, which is, you just press down three buttons and it goes doodle doodle doodle. It will play through those notes. Well, that's sort of generating music for you, right? You'd only play 3 notes and it made a lot more out of that. And so there was always this generative, algorithmically derived things. I think one of the challenges from the AI side of it is that the source of how it is creating generative is a little vague.
Do you think there is another consideration here as well, which is that with that type of tool set, that there is a threat to creativity just in general? Because when it becomes easy to generate a 3.5 minute track with literally a single button press, aside from removing the human element, there's eventually just a plethora of stuff that is in some way or somehow all pretty similar within some sort of bounds of parameters, right? And because it hasn't had that original human input into it.
Most music, music is evolutionary, so it's influenced by things that have gone in the past, which is quite AI, like take a bunch of stuff and generate another thing that's influenced it. But it's when you take that, the creative step goes elsewhere. That's not the obvious thing to do next. What's not obvious to do, or combining sounds or doing things in a very different, more exploratory way. And so if you are seeing music as utilitarian, lift music as it might have been called in the past, or elevator, Or, but same in if you've got a piece of media and you just need something in the background so it doesn't sound like dead air underneath it, then okay, you could probably use generative AI to do that rather than a human being to do it, but it isn't valuing that. It's just filling some space. I think anything that's valuable, needs to have some human in it. Do you really want... music's about, emotions often. It's evoking emotions. And if you're doing a TV show and you want to evoke somebody's emotion, then having a human involved in that process is going to be a lot better, because, emotion's about love and such. Do you want artificial love or do you want real love? Somebody who's...
There's a question.
Well, yeah, exactly. It's just like, you want a real human involved in that?
100%. I couldn't agree more. And like where music is in service of a program or a film or what have you, it is a combination of the video and the audio elements that create that emotion. You may be listening to a piece of music and you feel very emotional because of it, very happy, very sad, whatever it might be. Equally, if you're watching a TV program and you were to turn the sound off, so you didn't have that music and audio in the background, I wonder whether it necessarily evoked the same level of emotion.
Watch Jaws without the famous dun. It's not. It's actually almost funny because it doesn't have that. But who would have thought
the two together?
Yeah, and who would have thought just 2 notes? That's it. It's just 2 notes, but it evokes so much, and it's that understanding of emotion and understanding of those things and what's appropriate for that particular thing. But I won't be totally down on it because, again, from an accessibility perspective, it's great. If you're learning to have something generate something for you, it was quite fun when I was a kid to get the little old keyboard and put on the little bossa nova patch and press some buttons and it made a little sound.
Nothing wrong with a bit of bossa nova.
Yeah, it was fun, and you kind of understood, how if you played chords that you would make an accompaniment out of it, and it can be used as a sort of a source of inspiration and training and learning. But if that's what you then release, well, people are going to notice, I could have never released any of those bossa nova things because they sounded horrible or they sounded artificial. And again, the same with
you could learn off it.
I could, exactly. And I think if it can learn over it and it can make things accessible so that maybe you could be working with real musicians, but you just didn't know how to get to that point. You had the idea, you could play it in, but you didn't know how to create all the parts for a string ensemble. Well, maybe AI can help you to do that, to help you to get to that point.
And let's finish up with the jelly hammers, but at the same time, take a little bit of that hammer forward, maybe just cleave a little bit off. In that last point you made around being able to collaborate, I think that's one of your kind of hopes for the kind of go forward, the future of music production, is that those tools and others might lead to in kind of enhanced collaboration for people, and maybe it's people with less musical skill and more musical skill, or maybe it's people that with equally advanced levels that might not have been able to collaborate together in such a way before. Is that one of the things that excites you about not just music production in the future, but some of the technologies that are supporting it? Is that it will, again, it'll be in service of some of these new ways of making music.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I was involved in a project called Piano Book, which was really an amazing community initiative, because people would go and they would go into their cupboard, or they'd go to their home and they would record their instrument note by note, individual notes, which would be sampling, and then you could distribute it. And they're almost like amazing time capsules, because a musical instrument is different day to day.
Yeah.
And you're capturing it at a point in time, and usually with a story, coming back to, that's the piano that I used to sit at on my mum's knee. There's a story behind that, and that can evoke creativity down the line. Oh, wow, that was quite an amazing thing to think that was in somebody's home, and I've captured some sort of time capsule of it. And it's such an amazing collaborative initiative, because you've got some people who are very technical and capable of doing all the programming that's required. Is less and less these days, but there's still programming required to build from the raw recordings, build out one of these instruments. There's people building beautiful user interfaces for it to inspire you. And so there's also that technical and creative collaboration as well, which I think is fascinating.
That's a nice fusing of the two, isn't it? Because I know one of the other things that you were of a mind to say was that you want to be able to equally marry the technology and the artistry together, right?
Yes.
And when they are together, they're very, very powerful indeed. You can do some amazing, amazing things.
Absolutely.
But it's maybe the knack of it all would just be finding the balance between the two.
Yeah, and just always remembering to bring the humanity into it. Bring that humanity into what you're doing, because otherwise it can sound sterile, it can sound, blocky or something. And so bringing your own human element, whatever it is, whatever even if it means going back to one of those synthesizers from the 1970s and plugging it in and just recording it, as opposed to having something that was in the box, or taking, a live recording, or just going and, hitting a glass with a stick or something. Anything that brings some additional humanity in it, I think that's, a fantastic way of continuing to evolve music in a creative way.
It's awesome. I mean, it's such a good discussion. I feel like we could just go and go on this. I mean, whether it's your Jelly Hammer, whether it's your Bossa Nova, there could be a lot of directions we could go in. But it's just such a fascinating discussion. It's clearly something that you are, it's evident, very, very passionate about. And as I said, I think you're relatively uniquely positioned because you're very deeply technical as well. So you understand everything underneath. It's such a good discussion. I think unfortunately we have to wrap up for today. So just to thank the viewers for watching. Again, with Pause, Rewind and Play, we love a subscription, we love a like. And like with all things in technology, when we're diving in detail, it is good to pause, rewind and play.